Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at a story about gold and data and international trade. It's from the Indian Express, published December 24th, 2024. And basically what's going on is that India's gold imports for November just went through the roof.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. On the one hand, it looks like everybody in India just suddenly decided to buy a ton of gold.
Hmm.
But if you look closer, there's a chance that this huge increase could actually be a data glitch, like maybe a case of double counting the gold.
Okay, so let's break this down. India imported 180 tons of gold in November, which comes out to like $14.3 billion. And just for context, that's
Hmm.
3 times higher than the average of the past few months.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of double counting comes in. Back in July of 2024, India switched over to a new system for all their import and export paperwork. It's called the IceGate platform, and it replaced the old NSDL platform. This was supposed to make trade smoother, but it might have accidentally created this loophole.
So how could this new system be messing up the numbers?
Well, think about special economic zones, those SEZs. When gold first comes into an SEZ, it gets recorded as an import. But now under the new system, when that same gold leaves the SEZ to go to markets inside India, it seems like it's being counted as another import all over again.
Wait, so if that's happening, wouldn't the government lose out on taxes?
That's a really good point, and it's definitely something they'd want to figure out. I mean, the impact on tax revenue could be huge.
So before we get too far into this, can you remind us why gold is such a big deal in India in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. Gold in India isn't just like any other commodity. It's woven into their culture and traditions for generations. It's been a symbol of wealth and success. They give it as gifts at weddings and festivals. And it's always been seen as a safe investment.
So it makes sense that anything that happens with gold prices can have a ripple effect on India's entire economy.
Exactly. Now here's where things get even more complicated. Even if we account for this potential data error, the demand for gold in India still seems to be unusually high.
So there must be other things going on too, right? What's driving this demand?
Well, there are a couple of factors. First, earlier this year, the Indian government lowered the import duty on gold from 15% all the way down to 6%. So naturally, businesses are much more interested in importing gold now.
Right, lower import costs make it way more affordable.
And then there's the fact that gold has been doing really well as an investment. The article says returns are close to 30% this year.
So this surge in imports could partly be investors looking for a safe bet and a chance to make some good money.
Exactly. And keep in mind, this isn't just happening in India. Central banks around the world are also buying up more gold. So it seems like there's a global shift towards seeing gold as a stable asset.
So India's situation might just be reflecting a bigger trend.
That's a good observation.
Now, before we finish up this part of our deep dive, we need to talk about something really important. If this double counting thing is as big as some people think, it could really distort our understanding of India's trade balance.
You're right. And this brings us to the idea of a trade deficit, basically.
Yeah.
It's when a country imports more stuff than it exports.
And if the gold import figures are inflated, it makes India's trade deficit look even worse, right?
Exactly. And the article actually says that India's trade deficit hit a record high of $38 billion in November. So getting this right is crucial for figuring out how healthy India's economy actually is.
So this is where the GTRI comes in. They're a think tank, and they've been giving the Indian government some advice.
Yes, the GTRI is urging the government to take a hard look at how they're keeping track of gold movements. They're arguing that just moving gold around inside India, like from an SEZ to a domestic market, shouldn't be counted as a new import.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like the current system might be accidentally giving us the wrong picture of what's going on with gold.
Exactly. It really shows how important data accuracy is and how transparent governments need to be when they're tracking and reporting economic activity.
So it looks like we've got a potential data mystery here with some pretty serious consequences. We'll be back in a moment to explore what all this means for India, the global economy, and of course you, our listeners, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our deep dive into India's gold market. And yeah, things are getting really interesting now. We've got this potential data mystery with those crazy high import numbers. And I think it's time to look at the bigger picture, like what this could mean for everyone.
Okay, but honestly, you might be thinking, why should I care about some data glitch happening on the other side of the world?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think what this situation really highlights is how much we all depend on good data, especially in this global economy. We're all connected now. So imagine you're an investor trying to decide where to put your money. You see data that says India's economy is doing great, but what if that data is wrong?
Yeah.
You can end up making a really bad decision based on faulty information. And this isn't just some hypothetical thing. We've seen this happen time and time again, where bad data has led to financial crises that impact everyone.
So it's not just about the numbers themselves, it's about the domino effect they can have if they're not accurate. So what are some other consequences of having bad data?
Well, governments need accurate trade data to make good economic policies, and businesses rely on it to understand market trends and make smart decisions. So think about it. Policymakers might put in place tariffs or trade deals based on a skewed understanding of imports and exports, and companies might make investment decisions based on bad market signals.
Yeah.
The ripple effects can be huge.
It seems like this whole gold import thing is pointing to a much bigger issue with how we view the global economy in general.
Absolutely. It really underlines how important it is to have systems in place that can ensure we're working with accurate data and that everything is transparent. We need checks and balances to catch these discrepancies before they turn into bigger problems.
So what happens when those checks and balances fail to do their job?
Well, we're kind of seeing it play out in India right now. This whole possibility of gold imports being overcounted has created a lot of uncertainty. Investors might hold back, worried about how reliable India's economic data is, and businesses might hesitate to expand because they're not sure what the real demand is, and all this uncertainty can really drag down economic growth.
It's like trying to steer a ship through fog. You need a clear view to make good decisions.
Exactly, and this brings us back to our responsibility as individuals, investors, citizens in this global economy. We can't just take data at face value. We need to be a bit skeptical, question things, and think about whether the information we're seeing could be biased or just plain wrong.
It's like that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you start with bad data, you're going to end up with bad results.
You're exactly right. And these days, we're bombarded with information from everywhere. So being able to think critically and separate the good data from the noise is more important than ever.
So let's take a step back for a second and think about those other factors driving up demand for gold in India, even if we ignore the data problem. Now, remember how we talked about the government cutting import duties on gold?
Yes, reducing the import duty from 15% to 6% has definitely made importing gold a lot more appealing for businesses, that's for sure.
Makes sense. Lower costs make gold more accessible.
Plus, gold has been a really good investment this year. The article said returns are almost 30%, so it's a big incentive.
Yeah, it's easy to see why people are going for gold with all the economic uncertainty going around.
And don't forget, it's not just individual investors. Central banks around the world are also boosting their gold reserves.
And why are they doing that?
Well, some analysts think it's to protect against inflation. Others see it as a lack of confidence in the U.S. dollar. It's a complicated issue with a lot of geopolitical factors involved, something we could definitely explore more in depth another time.
So it seems like what's happening in India with gold is just a small piece of a much larger global trend.
You got it. It really shows how interconnected we all are.
Okay, so we've talked about this data mystery and what it could mean for the global economy, but what are the main takeaways here? What do you want our listeners to remember from all this?
I'd say there are three really important points. First, global trade is a lot more complex than it looks, and even small changes like how things are reported can have unintended consequences that reach far beyond their original purpose.
Second, we need accurate data to truly understand the economy and make smart decisions.
And third, we all have a responsibility to be critical thinkers, to question what we see and to double-check the information that's given to us, especially when it comes to something as important as the economy.
We've covered a lot today, from this potential data problem to how it connects to the bigger picture of the global economy. But now let's bring it back to India and see what this situation could mean for them specifically. In our final segment, we'll dig into some more insights from the article and look at some possible solutions to this data dilemma. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into India and their gold imports. So we've looked at the data discrepancies and the wider impact this could have on the global economy. But now let's focus in on what all of this means specifically for India.
You know what's really interesting is that even if we fix this whole double counting problem, the demand for gold in India is still way higher than usual.
So even if we clean up the data, something's still off about how much gold they're bringing in. Remember how we talked about the government cutting those import duties? Let's go back to that for a second.
Yeah, cutting those duties from 15% to 6% has definitely made a difference. It's like they've opened the floodgates, making it easier and cheaper for businesses to import gold.
And this isn't happening in isolation. Gold has been a fantastic investment this year. I mean, the article mentioned returns of almost 30%, That's pretty tempting, especially when things are uncertain economically.
Absolutely. It's like the perfect recipe for increased demand. Lower import costs make gold easier to get. And then you've got these great returns. It's attracting everyone from seasoned investors to people just looking for a safe place to put their money.
And remember, it's not just individuals driving this demand either. Central banks all over the world are also stocking up on gold.
Exactly. Now, why they're doing that is another story. Some say it's to protect against inflation. Others think it shows a lack of trust in the US dollar. It's a whole debate with a lot of geopolitical angles. But the point is, what's happening in India is part of something much bigger.
It's a good reminder that what seems like a local event can be tied to these massive global trends.
Absolutely. Now, going back to the data problem, the GTRI's suggestion to rethink how India tracks gold is crucial. They want a system that can tell the difference between gold coming into the country
Yeah.
and gold simply being moved around within India.
So basically, if gold is imported and stored in an SEZ and then sold domestically, that shouldn't count as a new import.
Exactly. They're worried that the current system is giving us a warped view of the gold market, and that could lead to some bad economic choices.
And this isn't just about gold either. If this kind of data problem can happen with gold, what other areas of international trade could be affected?
That's a big question. It really shows how important it is to have really good systems for collecting and reporting data on trade. This isn't just about numbers, it's about trust and being open about how the global economy works.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today,
Yeah.
what are the key things you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think this story shows us how connected the global economy really is. What happens in one part of the world, whether it's a data issue in India or a policy change somewhere else, can have consequences that reach far and wide. It also reminds us how important it is to be informed, to be critical of the information we see, especially when it comes to economic data.
It's like we're all part of this giant complex game, and understanding the rules, questioning things, and making sure we have accurate information are key to navigating this constantly changing world.
I like that analogy. The more we understand how the global economy works,
Yeah.
the better decisions we can make, whether as individuals, investors, or citizens.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey through gold data and the fascinating world of international trade. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep diving deep.